In 1923, one of the wealthiest industrial titans in Europe didn't lose his fortune to a market crash or a rival's hostile takeover. He lost it because of a single sentence spoken in a dimly lit ballroom. He fell because he violated a primal law of human nature, a law so savage that once you break it, your value in the eyes of others evaporates instantly. While the world watched the surface-level drama of high society, there was a man who stayed in the shadows, documenting the carnage with the cold precision of a surgeon. He wasn't a billionaire or a celebrity. He was a master of human dynamics who spent decades observing the darkest vulnerabilities of the elite. He watched as the most powerful men on earth, men who controlled industries, turned into beggars the moment they felt a flicker of desire. But stay with me, because what he discovered in those high-stakes boardrooms and private galleries isn't just a history lesson. It's about you. It's about why the person you want most is often the one you can't seem to keep. It's about why your goodness is being mistaken for weakness. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on a pattern that has destroyed reputations and relationships for centuries. It all comes down to a three-word savage law that dictates who holds the power and who is merely a guest in someone else's game. I know savage law sounds extreme, so let me bring it to life with a story of a man who had everything, and the moment he realized that his desire was actually his greatest prison. This is the breakdown of outcome independence and the psychological mechanism that makes you truly irresistible. Before we reveal the three words that change everything, you need to decide if you're ready for the truth. This channel is dedicated to the uncomfortable psychological patterns that most people are too afraid to face. If you want to master the art of self-sovereignty and stop being a spectator in your own life, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss the darker breakdowns coming next. In the velvet-drenched silence of that 1923 ballroom, as the industrial titan watched his influence dissolve into the air, he wasn't being outsmarted by a superior intellect. He was being dismantled by a biological mechanism he didn't even know he possessed. To understand how a man with everything can be reduced to nothing in seconds, you have to look past the wealth and the titles and see the invisible leash that ties a man to his own destruction. That leash is composed of three words, a law so savage it forms the bedrock of all human dominance and attraction. It is the law of being willing to lose. To the uninitiated, this sounds like a paradox. We are taught from birth that power comes from the pursuit, the hunt, and the ultimate capture of what we desire. But the Shadow Master, who observed the fall of the elite, understood a much darker reality. He saw that the moment you decide you must have something, whether it's a woman's validation, a rival's respect, or a closing signature on a contract, you have handed the other person the keys to your psychological prison. You have moved from a position of desire to a position of need. And in the architecture of the human mind, neediness is the ultimate scent of death. The savage law dictates that your value is not determined by what you possess, but by what you are capable of walking away from. It is the psychological art of outcome independence. When you are willing to lose, you remove the only hook the world has to manipulate you. Think of the titan in the ballroom. He didn't lose because he lacked money. He lost because the woman across from him sensed that he was no longer willing to walk away empty-handed. He had become a beggar for her approval. The moment she smelled that internal desperation, his billions became worthless paper. This isn't about being cold or robotic. It is about maintaining a desire without need. It is the ability to want something with every fiber of your being, while simultaneously being perfectly okay if it never happens. This is the beginning of real power, the savage realization that until you are genuinely prepared to lose it all, you will never truly own anything. In the natural world, the predator never rushes. If you watch a leopard stalking through the tall grass, you'll notice a chilling lack of urgency. It does not look like it needs the kill. It looks like the kill is an inevitable consequence of its nature. It is this exact quality of predatory indifference that high-stakes social hierarchies reward, and it is the same quality that the modern world has conditioned out of you. Nature has an ancient, brutal radar for desperation. When a creature, or a man, operates from a place of frantic pursuit, it signals to every observer that the object of the chase is more valuable than the chaser. This is the fundamental error of the supplicant. By chasing, you are announcing to the world that you are incomplete without the prize. You are effectively advertising your own low status. In the brutal logic of the hierarchy, value is never given to those who beg for it. It is reserved for those who appear as though they could take it or leave it without a second thought. This is why social and professional rewards flow toward the indifferent. The man who is willing to walk away from a deal, the individual who doesn't laugh at a joke just to be polite, and the lover who doesn't panic when a partner pulls away. These people are operating on the predator's logic. They understand that the moment you show you are invested in the outcome, you have become predictable. And in the game of power, to be predictable is to be manageable. The hierarchy doesn't reward the hardest worker or the most eager pleaser. It rewards the person who holds the most frame. And frame is built on the cold foundation of indifference. When you stop the chase, you force the world to come to you. You flip the biological switch from prey to predator. The hierarchy stops looking at you as a resource to be exploited and starts looking at you as a force to be reckoned with. True dominance isn't found in the noise of the pursuit, but in the terrifying stillness of a man who knows he is already whole, regardless of whether the world gives him what he wants. To master the savage law, you must first confront the uncomfortable truth that you are likely hemorrhaging power in ways you've become blind to. This is the mirror of weakness, and most men are terrified to look into it. You see, neediness isn't always a loud, desperate cry. It is a quiet, persistent leak that drains your authority in every interaction. It's the split-second decision to reply to a text the moment it hits your phone. Not because you're efficient, but because you're subconsciously terrified that a delay will cause the other person to lose interest. In that micro moment, you have signaled that their time is a luxury and yours is an infinite, cheap commodity. The leak shows up in the way you speak, particularly when you feel the urge to over-explain. When you justify your decisions or provide a paragraph of context for a simple no, you are essentially auditioning for the other person's approval. You are signaling that you don't trust your own judgment enough for it to stand alone. You need them to validate your reasoning. You are, quite literally, asking for permission to exist in your own frame. Every extra word is a brick in the wall of your own psychological prison, showing the world that you are managed by the fear of being misunderstood or disliked. Look closely at your daily habits. Do you find yourself adjusting your opinions to match the temperature of the room? Do you wait for a green light from others before you take a risk? This permission-seeking behavior is a neon sign to the predators and observers of the world. It tells them exactly where your hook is located. Machiavelli saw this in the ambassadors of Florence, who would lose their strategic edge because they wanted to be seen as reasonable or likable by their enemies. They were leaking neediness through their desire for a favorable reputation, and in doing so, they became predictable pawns. To stop the leak, you must stop the performance. You must realize that every time you reach out to secure someone else's comfort at the expense of your own boundaries, you are breaking the savage law. You are proving that you are not yet willing to lose. Until you can stare into this mirror and admit where you are begging for validation, you will remain the servant of anyone who has the courage to walk away. History is littered with the corpses of men who spoke too much and felt too loudly, but it is anchored by those who understood the terrifying power of the void. Consider the case of a high-ranking diplomat during the height of the Napoleonic Wars, a man whose influence grew not through the brilliance of his arguments, but through the strategic application of his silence. While generals were screaming orders and politicians were begging for alliances, this man sat in the gilded halls of power and practiced the art of the non-reaction. He was a master of the savage law before it had a name. In one famous negotiation, a rival known for his explosive temper tried to bait him, hurling insults and threats across a mahogany table to force a concession. The rival was looking for a hook, a flash of anger, a defensive explanation, or even a nervous twitch that would signal he had successfully reached the diplomat's ego. But the diplomat did nothing. He didn't blink. He didn't tighten his jaw. He didn't offer a single word of rebuttal. He simply watched, his face a mask of polite indifference. Because he refused to react, the rival began to unravel. Without a target to hit, the rival's own aggression turned inward. He started talking more to fill the silence, accidentally leaking secrets and lowering his demands, eventually giving away the very territory he had come to protect. This diplomat understood that power flows to the person who is most comfortable with stillness. By refusing to be moved, he signaled to the room that he was entirely willing to lose the conversation, which in turn made him the only person who couldn't be controlled. He realized that a reaction is a form of payment. It tells the other person that they have successfully influenced your internal state. When you withhold that payment, you bankrupt your opponent's strategy. This historical precedent serves as a chilling reminder. The person who can sit in the heat of a conflict and feel no need to defend themselves is the only person who is truly free. They aren't just participating in the game. They are the ones defining the terms, simply because they have mastered the most dangerous weapon in the human arsenal: the ability to remain unmoved by the chaos of another person's desire. To master the savage law, you must undergo a violent internal shift in perspective, a psychological pivot that separates the masters from the masses. This is the transition from a state of supplication to a state of evaluation. Most men walk into a room, a date, or a negotiation with a subconscious mantra playing on a loop. I hope they like me. This single thought is a declaration of bankruptcy. It places the power of judgment entirely in the hands of the other person, leaving you to perform, dance, and scan their face for hints of approval. You have made yourself the product, and you are desperately hoping they find you worth the purchase. The pivot to outcome independence replaces this desperation with a much more dangerous curiosity. The mantra shifts from "I hope they like me" to "I'm curious to see if I like them." Notice the subtle but tectonic change in the power dynamic. In the first scenario, you are the applicant. In the second, you are the interviewer. By moving into a state of curiosity, you reclaim your seat at the head of the table. You are no longer looking for a yes to validate your existence. You are looking for evidence to see if the person or the deal across from you actually meets your standards. This isn't an arrogant performance or a defensive wall. It is a profound realization that your time and your energy are the most valuable assets you possess. When you are truly outcome independent, you become a detached observer of the interaction. You watch their maneuvers, their words, and their tells without the fog of emotional need clouding your vision. You aren't attached to the win because you realize that walking away from a subpar situation is the ultimate win. This is the desire without need that the Shadow Masters documented in the halls of Florence. It is the ability to want the best possible result while being fundamentally unchanged if the result is a total loss. When you stop auditioning for the world starts auditioning for you. You realize that the only person whose approval can actually change your life is the one staring back at you in the mirror. Once you stop caring about the yes, you become the most magnetic force in the room, because people are instinctively drawn to the one person who doesn't seem to need them at all. To understand the savage law in theory is one thing, but to apply it when your blood is hot and the stakes are real is the true test of a master. This is the moment of the silent walkaway, the point where you intentionally invite the very loss you used to fear. Imagine a scenario where you are deep into a negotiation or a developing relationship. You have invested time, effort, and perhaps even a vision of the future. Suddenly, the other party shifts. They become dismissive. They push for an unfair concession, or they begin to play a game of emotional withdrawal to see how much you will bend to keep them. The average man feels the hook at this moment. His stomach tightens, and his instinct screams at him to bridge the gap, to explain, to negotiate, to fix the tension. But the man who has internalized the savage law does the opposite. He recognizes the tension not as a problem to be solved, but as a test to be passed. Instead of leaning in, he creates a vacuum. He offers a brief, calm statement of his position, and then he does the most terrifying thing a human being can do in a state of conflict. He stops. He doesn't offer a counter-proposal. He doesn't ask for a second chance. He simply moves on to his next task, genuinely prepared for that door to stay closed forever. This is the silent walkaway. It is not a bluff or a theatrical performance designed to get a reaction. It is a profound exercise in self-sovereignty. By walking away without a backward glance, you are sending a shockwave through the other person's psychology. You are proving that your life is a moving train, and they are merely a passenger who has the option to stay or disembark. When you refuse to chase, you force them to confront the reality of losing you. In that silence, the power dynamic flips completely. The person who was trying to leverage your desire suddenly realizes they have no leverage at all. They are left holding a hook with nothing to catch. The silent walkaway is the ultimate practical application of being willing to lose, because it demonstrates that you value your own internal peace more than any external prize. It is the moment you stop being the one who waits for the door to open and become the one who decides if the door is even worth your time. This is the moment where the philosophy stops being a concept and becomes a blood sport. You are standing at the edge of the abyss, and for the first time, you aren't looking for a way across. You are preparing to jump. This is the internal showdown, the fierce psychological execution of the man you used to be. Every fiber of your biological conditioning is screaming at you to reach out, to soften your stance, to offer one last compromise that might secure the validation you've been addicted to for a lifetime. Your ego is thrashing like a cornered animal, whispering that if you let this go, you are nothing. To pass this climax, you must perform a cold-blooded act of internal violence. You have to take the version of yourself that needs a yes to feel worthy and put him to death. You must watch him struggle and refuse to offer him a drop of water. In this silence, you aren't just losing a deal or a person, you are losing the chains that have kept you manageable. It is an agonizing transition because human beings are wired to seek the warmth of inclusion. But real power is forged in the freezing cold of total self-sufficiency. When you sit in that tension and refuse to flinch, something transformative happens. The hook that has been embedded in your psyche for years finally snaps. You realize that the yes you were chasing was never actually the prize. It was a drug used to numb the fear of your own inadequacy. By killing the need for that drug, you become dangerous. You are no longer a participant in the other person's reality. You have become the architect of your own. The internal showdown ends not with a bang, but with a terrifyingly calm realization. You don't need them to see you as worthy because you have finally stopped seeking permission to exist. The version of you that could be manipulated through his heart or his pride is gone. What remains is a man who is truly, for the first time, willing to lose. And because of that, he is the only one in the room who cannot be defeated. When the dust settles from that internal execution, you emerge into a reality that looks the same but functions by an entirely different set of physics. This is the transformation, the quiet, terrifying dawn of a man who has become unhookable. You will notice it first in the eyes of others. There is a specific type of social predator who survives by sniffing out the need in a room. And when they look at you, they will find nothing to latch onto. They will find a mirror where they expected a door. Because you are no longer broadcasting the static of desperation, your presence begins to carry a weight that cannot be faked. People who once took your time for granted will suddenly find themselves checking their own behavior in your presence. They instinctively feel that the old terms of engagement have been revoked. When a partner pulls away to test your reaction and finds only a calm, unbothered stillness, the power dynamic doesn't just shift, it shatters. They realize that they are no longer holding the leash. They are standing in the presence of someone who is genuinely, fundamentally free. This is the irony of the savage law. By becoming truly willing to lose people, you become the one person they are most terrified of losing. Your interactions become cleaner, stripped of the manipulative subtext that defines most human contact. In business, you'll find that people stop trying to negotiate your worth and start trying to meet your standards, because they can sense that you aren't auditioning for the deal. You are evaluating it. In your personal life, the frantic energy of the chase is replaced by a magnetic gravity. You aren't running toward anyone. You are a moving train, and people are suddenly scrambling to keep up. This new reality isn't about being alpha or aggressive. It is the natural byproduct of self-sovereignty. You have moved from the periphery of other people's stories to the absolute center of your own. You have discovered that the world only bends to those who do not need it to bend. By relinquishing the need to possess the outcome, you have finally gained the only thing worth having, a presence so grounded in its own reality that the hooks of the world simply slide off like rain on stone. This brings us to the final, most uncomfortable truth of all. The barriers to your greatness have never been external. They aren't your rivals, your lack of resources, or the person who won't call you back. Those are merely the mirrors reflecting your own internal poverty. The true barrier is the unexamined beggar living inside you, the version of you that is still terrified of the silence, still desperate for a yes, and still unwilling to lose. Machiavelli didn't document the ruins of Florence to write a history book. He did it to sound an alarm for the men who were capable of more. He believed that the majority of men sleepwalk through their lives as guests in a reality designed by someone else's desires. They are managed by their fears and owned by their attachments. But you have now been given the code to break that cycle. You have the beginning of real power, not the cheap power used to dominate others, but the absolute, unshakable sovereignty over yourself. This is the only authority that cannot be taken, taxed, or negotiated away. The question that remains is whether you have the courage to actually apply the savage law when the world tries to hook you tomorrow. Will you revert to the safety of the chase? Or will you stand in the stillness of your own worth? Stop asking for permission to be the prize. Stop auditioning for a role in a story that should belong to you. Mastery starts and ends with those 3 words: willing to lose. Once you truly accept that you can walk away from anything and survive, you finally become the master of everything. If this breakdown forced you to see a pattern you've been ignoring, share it with someone who is still losing a game they don't have to play. And if you're ready to descend further into the psychology of power and the mechanics of self-sabotage, subscribe and stay with us. Our next exploration will uncover something even darker: the psychological reason why men destroy the very things they have worked the hardest to build. The journey into the self is not for the comfortable, but it is the only path to the top. Until then, keep the mirror close, keep your leaks plugged, and above all, stay sharp. Machiavelli realized that many powerful men give their power away because they are outfelt, allowing their emotions to dictate decisions that logic never would have allowed.